Hello all, my name's Matt Johnston, and you have stumbled upon YouTube's best kept secret. If the viewing figures are anything to go by, this channel is called The Interesting Times. It's a comedy channel that looks at UK politics. So, the main point of topic this week will be, do we have free speech in this country? To which the answer is yes. Great. Thank you so much for joining me, and don't forget to subscribe. Okay, while we, and indeed every other country in history, has had free speech, what we don't have is consequence-free speech. But again, that's the same for every country throughout history. It's not possible to stop people saying things. You can only punish them when they do. It's like the thought police. Thinking isn't a crime, unless he gets into number 10, of course. There's been so much of this mentioned since the dawn of the digital age, where putting something online can potentially be seen by everyone on the planet. Something us Gen Xers have always found baffling and a little bit frightening. You pop an idea, an opinion out there, and bam, within an hour it's got several 100,000 retweets, and it's only several hours later that you've calmed down a bit, taken down your tweet in regret, but the damage has already been done. And yes, we are starting with the most talked about and divisive case in recent memory, that of Lucy Connelly. For those that don't know, Lucy Connelly is the wife of a Conservative councillor. In July last year, following the murder of 3 young girls in Southport, rumours started to circulate that the attacker was an asylum seeker. And against the backdrop of that, Lucy sent a tweet saying that there should be a mass deportations and hotels that house asylum seekers should be burned down, saying, if this makes me a racist, so be it. Yep, pretty sure that wanting to execute all asylum seekers for a crime none of them committed does make you a racist. She then took the tweet down a few hours later and subsequently called for calm. So, first lesson to all. Don't tweet angry. Second, check your facts. If you don't know your facts, guess what? Don't tweet. People don't have to hear your opinion as soon as it's gone into your head. But opinions are very much like arseholes. Just because you've got one, you don't have to show it to the whole world. The fallout from this was that following that factually incorrect, inflammatory, racist tweet, the country, or at least large parts of it, went a little bit rioty. And bricks were thrown, police were attacked, and indeed Lucy Connelly's suggestion of setting fire to immigrant hotels was picked up. Thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt, and Lucy Connelly was sentenced to 31 months in prison for inciting racial hatred, leaving people to decide, is she a victim of the country's, in particular Keir Starmer's, clampdown on free speech?
What does it mean if you live in a country where you can't express your views, no matter how unpalatable?
We have a woman called Lucy Connelly who's been given a 31-month prison sentence for saying something unpleasant.
One poor woman, Lucy Connelly, the wife of a Conservative councillor, ended up getting 31 months for a tweet, which admittedly was pretty nasty.
Or is she just a racist with a large following?
Is genuinely, given half the chance, a dangerous person. I mean, I'm not saying she's going to go out and do anything, but she's harbouring horrible, dangerous views. And I think punishment fits the crime.
When she goes and says to go and burn down hotels where people like me, brown-skinned people, or anyone else might be, that's where she crosses the line.
Nobody wants to address the racism and the Islamophobia and the anti-Muslim rhetoric. That is at the core of this issue.
Now, cards on the table. I was going to originally record a video about how this sentence was disproportionate and will only lead to Lucy Connelly being seen as a political prisoner, being in prison because there are certain things you can't say, etc. But a couple of things changed my mind. 2 clips, in fact. Firstly, this is Judge Melbourne in Marne passing sentence on Lucy Connelly last year.
You have had tragedy in your own life with the loss of your very young child some years ago. I accept that you still very keenly feel that loss. And whilst you may well have understood the grief of those who suffered their own tragic losses in Southport, you did not send a message of understanding and comfort, but rather an incitement to hatred.
Exactly. A message of love and support to the families going through that horrible pain surely would have meant more to them than this anger. Although, sad to say that might not have been retweeted several thousand times. And a big part of that relates to the second clip.
I mean, Yasmin is right to say if you transpose that into, let's say she called for people to go round to the home of a particular MP and set fire to it, and the MP was at home with her husband and their 4 children, you definitely want a long sentence for that.
Well, quite. Had Lucy Connelly talked about setting fire to an MP's house with them and their family still inside, the country would have been quite rightly appalled, especially if others had then tried to burn down the house. And a sentence of 2 years and 7 months would have been seen as being light. So all this is a racist tweet which some people have reacted to in a racist fashion. So people's speech and freedom of speech and the censorship seems to go from the most light-hearted, like not allowing Jeremy Clarkson to say fuck in his beer adverts, or slightly more serious, being sent home for wearing a Union Jack dress, or even more serious, losing your job for using a racial slur. All of these, though, pale into insignificance when compared to the most severe form of censorship, that imposed by the government.
He left number 10 this morning. There was no indication the PM was about to wield the axe in a brutal attempt to restore party discipline. But he did, suspending 4 MPs, Neil Duncan-Jordan, Chris Hinchliffe, Brian Leishman, Rachel Maskell from the Parliamentary Party for voting against the government.
So 4 MPs had the whip removed, 3 newbies and Rachel Maskell, who was elected a Labour MP at the same time as Starmer. But it's clear only one of them was joining the party because they believed in it.
You appear to have been singled out as perhaps a ringleader of the rebels.
Well, first of all, I don't see myself as a rebel.
Unless you mean rebel in the Star Wars sense, taking on the evil empire and Darth Starmer. You are part of the Rebel Alliance. Wait, that would make Jeremy Corbyn. Man, you've got to say George Lucas was a real visionary, wasn't he? That scene makes a whole lot more sense now. So, Starmer has taken the whip from 4 MPs who decided to vote with their conscience. No room for one of those in his party. But if you think this is petty and vindictive, you're wrong. It's far worse than that. This was a rebellion born out of frustration that the government would follow the Conservatives so blindly down the path of cutting benefits, and in most cases working benefits for those that need it most. That they would cut adrift those who have given years to the party for daring to speak out of turn. This was Rachel Maskell speaking a couple of weeks ago before the vote on the welfare bill.
And as the evidence shows, since 600 people took their lives under the Tories' brutal reforms, the tragedy of this ideology could be worse. So I will fight for the purpose of politics, for their livelihoods and their lives. It is a matter of conscience, deep conscience for me.
To be fair, that's just asking for trouble, especially from Keir What's-a-Conscience Starmer, who remains leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister of the UK, and no question that he will be victim of cancel culture anytime soon, even when he says the most sickening things.
And now is the time for a ceasefire.
Not earlier.
Because the circumstances...
It would have saved a lot of lives if you'd done it earlier.
The circumstances have changed dramatically. And Jeremy, to say to Israel immediately after October the 7th, you cannot go and get your hostages back for using force, wasn't something which a serious politician was ever going to say. I'm very clear. Israel must have that, does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation. You know, to say to a sovereign country, when 200 of its civilians are being held hostage, they must give up their right to self-defence, is not, for me, the correct position.
Okay, so yes, one subject more than any other, you have to say, really shows the differences when it comes to what you can and cannot say. The Gaza genocide. The genocide in Gaza. See, you're not even allowed to call it a genocide.
I'm well aware of the definition of genocide, and that is why I've never described this and referred to it as genocide.
What Israel's been doing in Gaza in the last few months...
Is it genocide?
...has crossed... I don't think it is genocide.
There isn't footage of these massacres because they're not taking place by Israeli soldiers.
Those terms were largely used when millions of people lost their lives in crises like Rwanda, the Second World War and the Holocaust. And the way that they are used now undermines the seriousness of that term.
Wait, are you seriously saying we're not calling it a genocide until we hit the millions? Well, what does the UN say? Right, if you look at this, it's a pretty bloody comprehensive list of what's happening in Gaza at the moment. And people are protesting this. But it's their protests that are the problem. Apparently, the UK government has outlawed Palestine Action and prescribed them a terrorist organisation after they chucked some paint on a plane. Yeah, a plane. Paint on a plane. To be fair to the government, it was red paint. Arrests have already been made against those that have dared to support a non-violent organisation, including an 83-year-old retired vicar who was, get this, holding up a placard. Yeah, go on, take her away. Good job, coppers. With her behind bars, the streets will be safe again. Okay, joking aside, are we really at the point of threatening people with 14 years in jail for individuals that sow support for a protest group? Isn't that true terrorism? And of course, the previous Conservative government had to go even further by stopping anybody even mentioning it. And by it, I mean, well, I don't know, because no one was allowed to mention it. Yes, back in 2022, a defence official inadvertently sent an email which had some 1,900 Afghan individuals who had helped the British forces over in Afghanistan. Something the Tory government wasn't aware of until it turned up in a Facebook post 18 months later. So the Tories did the best thing possible for themselves and slapped a super injunction on it. You know the super injunctions, right? What footballers use to stop the press reporting on whatever OnlyFans employee of the month is enjoying their sliding tackle? Well, Rishi Sunak's government used that to make sure everyone was aware that there would be no story. Good, eh? No, not really. The super injunction was lifted this week. Now, Grant Shapps, who was Defence Minister at the time, said that the super injunction was necessary to protect Afghani and indeed British troops, 100 of whose name was also included on that leak. Okay, makes sense. Stop the Taliban from even being aware that there could be a list and finding their names before they had a chance to airlift these individuals out. But they did airlift them out. So why go back in May 2024, 1 month before the general election, and try to keep it in place? A question asked by patriotic pencil Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was only too happy to throw Shapps under the horse-drawn carriage.
I think the initial argument that this was for the security of the individuals listed is not copper-bottomed. And then you come to, did this save ministers and civil servants from enormous embarrassment? And oh my goodness, yes it did. So then you say, which argument is most credible? That it was done out of embarrassment to cover something up, or it was done 18 months after the event?
And then there's Lettuce, who was Foreign Secretary at the time, being shocked and pleading complete ignorance. A claim that, let's be honest, is entirely credible. So, when governments stop people's freedom of speech, that's got to be the real issue, surely. That is a concern for your average John in the street. Well, I sent our roving reporter, Christian Simeone, out on the streets of London to gather a few opinions about opinions.
My name's Christian Simeone, and I'm introducing a new segment, The Interesting Perspective, where we ask members of the public questions about topical issues. Today's subject, freedom of speech. A new poll suggests that 50% of the population is scared to speak their mind. So we're asking the question, should we be scared to speak our mind, or should we be free to speak? Okay, so today we're asking about freedom of speech. My question to you is, do you think there is freedom of speech in the UK?
Well, I mean, as a tourist, it's kind of tough to say, but I tend to say that, yeah, probably yes. I mean, I'm not, the many times I've been visiting UK, it's never an issue, I think.
Okay. So yeah, you're from America, and the First Amendment indicates freedom of speech. Do you, as your brief time here and your comparisons between the two, do you feel any more or less freedom in either country?
Just with the people that I've talked to, I mean, even you guys coming up to me and just asking me to share my opinion, I think that it's pretty similar in terms of like how freely we can speak.
It has to be, right? Like the thing is, with like, it's similar like in Spain. For the last couple of years, there's been a lot of trouble in Spain with people complaining that the government is not, well, it's not as free as it's publicizing itself.
Negative opinions on a different group or like race or whatever perspective.
That's also an opinion.
And that should be allowed.
That is allowed by law in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And like I saw a demonstration for Gaza here.
Yeah.
So that is also allowed.
Whoa. Christian.
What?
Now, I sent you out so that you would talk to people about freedom of speech, right? Now, I understand that London's a cosmopolitan city, but for goodness sake, where are all the Brits?
Well, Matt, I've asked multiple and all have a new excuse. You know, either they've got to go back to work, they've got an urgent phone call, their grand's just gone to hospital. You know, everyone they don't want to answer. What do you want me to do? You don't pay me enough for this.
I don't pay you at all, to be fair. All right, for the purposes of this experiment, then, you are the voice of the UK. So, Christian, honest opinion, do we have free speech in this country? Can you say what you want?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. It's got a lot of nuance. There's a lot to say. 1 second, please. 1 second.
Wait, what?
This is an urgent phone call. I've got to take it.
No. And there we are. The British don't want to express an opinion because of an important phone call. And as I've mentioned on this show before, talking about this stuff is horribly uncomfortable, but also vitally important, because if you don't, someone else will. Him will. We need a response to difficult questions like,
Afghans are 20%, according to these numbers, 20 times more likely to account for sex offence convictions than British people. Does that concern you?
Okay, yeah. I'll take this one if I may. Sure, the stats when presented like that are concerning. However, a couple of things. Firstly, all of this comes from the Telegraph report, which in turn comes from Freedom of Information requests from the Ministry of Justice. But the paper has badly skewed the figures. For instance, and I'm taking the rest of the figures the Telegraph has published as genuine, even though they haven't even shown the response from the MOJ. So firstly, the Telegraph says, based on its figures, that 50% of sexual crimes are committed by foreign nationals, even though they only make up 9.3% of the UK population. But they then decide to add a further 8% of a group known as unknown nationalities, as probably most of them aren't British, maybe. And it is the 23% figure which gives the Telegraph their 71% figure of sexual crimes committed by foreigners. Then there's the Afghans are 20 times as likely to commit sexual crimes as Brits, quoted not only by the presenter here, but others who frighteningly hold more power.
Afghans and Eritreans living in this country are 20 times more likely to commit sex crimes than British nationals.
But the Telegraph's own graphs show that this isn't the case, and the actual figure is less than 10 times as much. And then, secondly, there were nearly 2 million sexual assault crimes reported to the police. Now, I don't know about you, but I want the police to have the resources to look into all of them, and maybe concentrate on the fact that nearly 1.9 million, or 89% of those, went unsolved. You know, If we really do care about women's safety, freedom of speech is important, but it isn't fundamental. Why? Because the loudest people with the most freedom of speech can use it to complain about their lack of freedom of speech when they use that to suppress others' freedom of those who they don't agree with. Freedom of speech is important, but intent, now that is fundamental. And even more important than either of those is facts. Facts must trump freedom of speech every single time. And that is something that is likely to only scare the right whingers. And that's it. No time to talk about the fact that certain people are saying that the UK economy is starting to turn a corner after GDP unexpectedly rose by 0.1% in May. Let the good times roll. Although last week inflation then unexpectedly rose by 0.2%. Honestly, all this unexpected stuff, you got a better chance of predicting the weather. This is your UK weather forecast for 2025. Rainy. Anyway, haven't we got someone in charge of the economy who used to work at the Bank of England? Probably. But until they turn up, we've got Rachel Reeves, who has decided to party like it's 2008 by deregulating large parts of the financial sector and giving the city the sort of freedom that worked out so well last time, including streamlining the regime that held bank leaders accountable and reining in the financial ombudsman who oversaw that accountability. All of this in the hopes that when the city boys start popping their champagne, then all of it comes trickling down to us at the bottom. Oh yeah, there we go. Look at all that yellow liquid coming down, everyone. Yeah, that is champagne, right? And keeping with the money theme, there was considerable consternation when HMRC couldn't say how many billionaires live in the UK, despite so many right-wing media outlets telling us that they're all leaving the country. I say if you want to find the money, you've got to follow the money. So, HMRC, look out for people buying football clubs, fast cars and health secretaries. No time to talk about Keir Starmer reducing the voting age to 16. Nigel Farage was initially happy, but then got angry once he realised it was age and not IQ. And finally, Keir Starmer welcomed the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and signed a joint declaration to say we will come to each other's aid in the event of either of us being attacked. It's almost like they don't trust Trump. Wait a minute. I'm seeing what's going on here. Dark blue and purple. These aren't agreements, they're passports. Don't do it, Chancellor Merz. You'll have to queue for days just to get back in your country. Crikey. No wonder Starmer's looking so happy. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Hope you've enjoyed the video and feel free to subscribe, comment, share, like and hit all the notifications bell so you don't miss another. And I'll see you all soon. Take care.